Which punishment sounds light or easy at first, but is actually horrific to receive? Story 1. The Incans had a punishment for smaller offenses that seems lesser known. The criminal would be bound to a post and spat upon by llamas. Not just a few either, like 0.50 llamas. I thought that sounded pretty silly and harmless at first when I heard of it, but apparently the threat was taken pretty seriously. Story 2. In high school, 2 of my friends were messing around at tennis practice, and the coach made everyone else run extra laps. On face value, it seems like the messing around people got off easy, but having the rest of the team mad at you is a really effective punishment. Story 3. When my high school's district banned paddling spanking as punishment, they switched to something even more effective. Billy rags. They're just rags that have been wiped all over male goats in rut. Goat farms sell them for goat breeding purposes. Lady goats love them. If you acted up, you'd be sent to the VP's office. He'd take you outside. Wouldn't dare to open the jar indoors. He opened the jar with the rag in it, and you'd have to stick your nose in there and inhale for 60 seconds. Let me tell you, bullying and hazing went way down. Story 4. Learned this one from a friend. She was a history student in grad school. She found this story in some old book in a library when doing research for a paper. The book version was surely much better, but I'll relate it as best as I can. I have mentioned this before on here, but it's a pretty perfect story for this question. There was some European king in the late Middle Ages. He really liked his dogs. He had several dogs, staff on hand to train them, and demanded that they be shown the highest respect, even more so than the dukes, other members of his royal court. He would also allow them free rein to roam around even at fancy banquets, and God help you if you denied them some of your food. Well, apparently one day at some sort of formal dinner or event, one of the king's beloved dogs got up on the lap of a duke. The duke tried to show respect and allowed the dog to get up on him, but as the dog began panting in his face, the duke gagged and retched from the dog breath. I imagine him turning his face away, fanning the air, maybe even pushing the dog off him, lol. The king, seeing this, was livid. He summoned his guards and issued the following sentence on the duke. Take him to the dungeon, bind him and lay him down, face up. For a period of 2 weeks, he is to smell dog breath day and night. Work with my dog trainers and make sure he doesn't spend a single waking moment without a dog panting in his face. Rotate the dogs every few minutes so he cannot adjust to the smell. He was allowed 6 hours a night to sleep and a couple meal-drink breaks to keep him alive, but that was it. 18 hours a day of dog breath. Story 5, outlawry, to be declared an outlaw. Today, we think of an outlaw as just anybody who breaks the law regularly. Back in the day, though, it was a punishment. If you were declared outlaw, that meant that you were literally outside of the law and could claim no protection from it. If someone didn't like you, they could freely beat you, rob you, torture you, or even kill you. When the stories refer to Robin Hood as an outlaw, that's what they're talking about. It's not a romantic, heroic, swashbuckling thing. It's the state of having no claim to any legal protection at all. The king, or whoever he appoints, takes your land. Anybody who wants it can take your stuff, and anybody who doesn't like you can just beat you to death without consequences. They can also put a bounty on your head and have people hunting you to claim it. What do you think would happen if you lost all protection from the law, and anybody who brought your head to the courthouse could claim a year's salary as a reward? Story 6, extra duty in the army. It's not losing rank or losing money. You're not going to jail. But then you're up until 2 a.m. every day polishing the same floor, rearranging rock garden rocks or sweeping rain out of the motor pool, and you've still got to be at work at 6:30 a.m., since the minimum amount of sleep for soldiers per regulation is, or was, they seem to have at least started to figure out how dumb this is, 4 HRs/night. And you work from 6:30 to 2 on the weekends, doing the aforementioned tasks, while everyone else has free time, for between 15 and 45 days. Story 7. A night in jail. No big deal, right? If you've got a job to be at, you might have just lost it. Your car probably got impounded, and that'll cost minimum $250 to get it out, even if you go the next morning. No money? Kiss your car goodbye. If you've got kids, CPS might come and get them. You'll have to fight to get them back out. Then if your job takes you back, you're pretty much stuck at it till you go to court, which could be the following year in some jurisdictions. And wait till your apartment hears about it when you go to renew your lease. You might not be able to renew and have to move someplace new. I'm lucky to be able to say this has never happened to me, but I don't pretend I've never broken the law. It could. Like that time my car insurance went unpaid because I forgot to update them with my new card number. What if I'd been pulled over? I think about this sort of crap all the time, too. A night in jail sounds like no big thing. And if you're basically transient to begin with or live with family still, maybe it's not. But if you're an adult with a life to maintain, that 12 hours could be the beginning of the end for you financially. Story 8. Sound. I know that it is well known that playing certain song sounds respectively has been used as a torture device. Personally, I can agree it is the worst. Not sure if anyone's ever seen the movie Dumb and Dumber, but there is a part where the main character asks if another character wants to hear the most annoying sound in the world. He then proceeds to yell in a loud, monotonous sound in his ear. The guy snaps angrily. Well, my daughter is nonverbal autistic and makes different sounds. She will go hours making the same exact noise, same pitch and tone without stopping. It is hell. Highest quality noise-canceling headphones and still hear her. I have used to go shooting and car races and barely heard anything. I will be on the other side of the house, heard. Neighbors, and our houses are quite a ways apart, have asked what is going on. I have her in special sessions now to at least change the sound to something else because stopping is not possible. I would rather be in constant pain than the sounds non-stop. Story 9. There's a pretty gruesome one from cavalry units in the military back in the day, until fairly recently. I've heard it go by different names, but the one used in the book I was reading, College Research, was riding under tail, the keel hauling of the cavalry. Apparently it was the most severe and feared punishment in many cavalry units, reserved for the worst offenses. The offending soldier was made to ride his horse sitting backwards and towards the rear. He was then made to start leaning down, bending over and straightening out, until his face was right up to the horse's rear end, literally less than an inch away. He would then be bound tightly in that position, particularly around the neck. Another soldier would ride the horse from the saddle, and the offending soldier would be made to endure a full day's ride from this position. Story 10. The oubliette standing cell. It's a jail cell so small you can't sit down, so you're forced to stand or wedge yourself against the concrete walls. They typically can only be accessed through a hatch in the ceiling. Standing doesn't seem so bad, but humans aren't meant to stand for extended periods. Blood pools at your feet, the lower body swells, the pain is crippling, and there's no way to get any relief. Even worse, oubliette comes from the French word oublier, to forget. They'd toss prisoners in these cells and literally just forget about them. No food, no water, they didn't even bother cleaning out the corpses. They'd just let the vermin eat their fill and toss a new prisoner on top of the pile of bones. Story 11. People are talking about some crazy punishments here, but I feel like in general, we underestimate how devastating standard punishments can be. People flippantly talk about 2-year, 5-year, 10-year prison sentences as if they are nothing, but as someone who's never been to prison, the thought of someone just removing me from my life for 5 years is terrifying. The idea of just losing 5 years of your life, 5 years of growth and development, 5 years of socialization, and 5 years of building relationships, without even considering the actual harm prison does in general, just the idea of missing out on your life is terrifying to me. I'm 27, when I look back at my life at 22, and think where I would be if the last 5 years of my life never happened. That would be devastating and stunt the rest of my life. Story 12. Bamboo shoots. Hear me out. It's far worse than sticking shoots up your fingernails. The horrific part is the bamboo shoots are still planted in the ground. They continue growing through your fingers. Bamboo grows very rapidly. If you don't talk today, you might tomorrow. Not just used for torture on fingers either. It was a common method of execution. They would hang prisoners above a bamboo shoot. After a day or so, the bamboo penetrates their body, and they eventually die by impaling. It took a few days. Imagine being impaled in slow motion by a plant. Story 13. Losing the right to vote when convicted of a felony. You're still expected to obey the laws and pay taxes, but you don't have any voice in the democratic process. We went to war over taxation without representation. Fortunately, this is changing. More states are restoring voting rights on release from prison. It's an unpopular opinion, but I think you should only lose your voting rights if you're convicted of treason. I think people should be able to vote from within prison. If prisons are supposedly teaching people to be productive members of society, why not start by letting them vote? Story 14. During summer camp for bad children, there was a punishment that they took your thumbs and tied them to your wrist. Not too tight, of course, but with a strong piece of rope. It looks like a fun and what the hell at first, but then you find out that almost everything you are doing with your hands is done or supported by thumb. Story 15. Threatening your kid with punishment if they don't change their emotional expression causes inability to control impulsivity, lifelong anxiety, uncontrollable rage, behavioral and academic problems at school, and PTSD. It was done to us, and I see my cousins doing it to their kids, and as these kids grow up, they're either a fucking mess as a child or a perfect little robot who becomes a fucking mess in adulthood, because they can't regulate without the complete control of their parent or the structure of school telling them what to do. aka, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about, or you get what you get and you don't get upset, or if you don't calm down right now, you won't get desired thing that was already promised later in day. Story 16. Probably minor compared to some on here, but being put in the corner as a child. I'm not talking about sitting on stool in timeout for 15 minutes. I'm talking about you have to put your nose in that corner. You have to stand there for perhaps an hour or more. You don't get to see what's going on behind you, so you don't know whether you're going to get a smack to the head, hard poke to the ribs, or in that damn space above the collarbone, pinches, etc. It's the uncertainty of what could happen that became horrific to me.